first of all asked Lucy, and Lucy rejected him, so he took consolation in her mother. Now, this is a bit of speculation, but I think it's completely wrong. He never had any designs on Lucy. Although Lucy and him remained friends the rest of their lives. Lucy was there when Johnson died, and Lucy became his stepdaughter, of course. And of course, Lucy was almost as old as Johnson, so she was the right age and so on. But I think the reason why he preferred Tetty to Lucy is exactly because of this so-called, well, he didn't want children, and this was a way how he wouldn't have to. It's a form of contraception. I think he says.
Probably didn't want to pass on his genes.
I don't think it was that. I don't think he was thinking in terms of his genes and passing on his genes. Later on, he had cats instead of dogs. I think it's exactly the same reason. Dogs just take that bit more looking after. He was very absent-minded. He was worried that if he had a dog, he'd neglect it and he might starve. Cats tend to take care of themselves. He had 2 cats, Holly and
Hodge, wasn't it?
Hodge.
There's a statue outside the house, isn't there?
Yes.
In Duff Square, is there?
Yeah, there is now. There wasn't. It's a fairly recent thing, I think. Yes, it is. No, you mentioned it. Just off Fleet Street.
Well, he had cats instead of dogs because of the same reason, I think. I think that's the reason. They looked after.
It was a very, very clever cat.
Well, he certainly had. I don't know whether he picked up any Latin, but I should imagine he got a dose of it. In other words, he heard Latin, whether he comprehended it or not, I don't know. I should imagine not. But anyway, so he had 2 cats. Yes, Hodge was one of them. That's right, and there's no. I forget the name of the other one. So I think that's the reason. He wouldn't have a dog, and although he liked dogs, and he wouldn't have a child because he thought he might neglect it. Of course, you might say, well, most men just let their wives look after the dog. Look after the. Beg your pardon for that. Most people just let their wives look after, especially back then in the 18th century, look after their children. Why didn't you do that? Well, I think he didn't think of that. But and you might say that's most unlikely, and perhaps it is. Perhaps this hypothesis of mine might be too brutal and not right. But that's what I think was the case. And anyway, he got on. He had a lot of rows with Tetty, but they basically got on quite well. Now Tetty and Lucy. There was also 2 sons. One son took dead against Johnson, and the other son and Lucy welcomed Johnson as their new father-in-law, new stepfather, and so the one son moved out, and the other son he didn't move out in Huff, but he did in a Huff, but he moved out as well. But Lucy and the mother remained together, and they both moved in with Johnson's mother in Lichfield. So that's moving from Birmingham to Lichfield. And they remained there, and Johnson set up a school. Now, again, he didn't know whether he was going to be an author or a schoolmaster, but noticed that all of his pupils, there weren't many of them in this school, they were all, the youngest of them was David Garrick, who was 16, and all the others were over 16. So he was teaching adult type people, and or at least teenagers, this school wasn't all that successful again because Johnson wasn't very presentable, and not many parents wanted to put their children under his jurisdiction. So the school more or less failed, and he's worried about. He set up this with aid from Tetty had brought with her from the Henrys and her estate, as it were, £750 thereabouts, and he used some of this to set up a school at Alden, just outside Lichfield, and he didn't. So the school more or less failed, and so he and after a very short time, and he and David Garrick went up to London, leaving Tetty and Lucy at Lichfield. And he took Irene with him, which was the play he hoped to put on in London. It was put on many years later, about 10 years later, by David Garrick when he was a famous actor. And he also had this plan for the Gentleman's magazine, which he'd been in contact with before he left Birmingham. He'd been in contact with Edward Cave, who was also from Birmingham, but now settled in London and set up the Gentleman's magazine. And Johnson did as much work as he could for that magazine, and for other magazines he's willing to turn his pen to any press. So he's more or less really a Broad Street type author now. But eventually he started writing there'd already been done coverage of the proceedings of Parliament. It was done in Gentleman's magazine, and Dr. Johnson, or actually Samuel Johnson, took it over from this earlier person. Now, whilst he was doing this for 2 or 3 years, it is said that his writings came to 500,000 words, which is quite a lot. You see, again, you're just overlooking, so that's 500,000 words on politics. And many people took this as being real reports from the House, and in fact he made the reputation of Pitt the elder and one or two other people were praised because of their speeches in the House, which Johnson had composed. He hadn't been anywhere near the House. And Smollett, who was writing the history of England, quoted that certain politicians said this, that and the other, and Johnson had to say, you know that I made that up, don't you? It's a kind of like a report. It's not an actual report from the House because it was banned, it was illegal. It's only later on that it was, in fact, the person we've covered in these talks, William Cobbett, who started off Cobbett's report from the House, which was brought up by Lancet. Is it Lancet? It's not Lancet.
It's medical.
Lancet's the medical thing.
Yeah.
The reportage of
Hansard.
Hansard. That's right. Hansard bought it from Cobbett, and Hansard, it's still called Hansard today, isn't it? And so it's Hansard, big pardon for that. That's folly. But so then so that was 500,000 words, and then he then had this offer from Dodsley for the dictionary, and so he sent around. Dodsley had contact with many publishers, and they wanted this dictionary, and so he took this up, and he sent around. He actually happened to Lord Chesterfield was one of the people who he had in mind as a good patron for this, and Lord Chesterfield jumped at it and wrote a piece saying this would probably be a good work. He gave Johnson £10. He'd already been given about £1,500 for the whole dictionary, but he had to employ people to help him copy the dictionary out, and it was a dictionary of the whole language. And Johnson was going to extend this. Ordinary dictionaries were just like the dictionary we have today, where they're just a few words for it. But Johnson was going to write essays on these words, and going to quote from Shakespeare and Pope and all of the antecedents. Exactly what you get in that big dictionary that we talked about earlier on. You get that. Johnson started that. It was a big innovation in the Johnson's dictionary. But of course, this was a massive task. There's about 25,000 words in the English language. And Johnson was going at this, and he's really biting off more than he could chew, or anyone could chew. And Johnson, anyone who praises Johnson here says he's done a hell of a good job. But of course, he never even covered 5,000 words. He only covered 4,200 words, thereabouts. In later editions, of course, there were 6 editions. He added as many words as he could, but he still didn't get up quite to 5,000 words. So this is 4/5 of the language was neglected by Johnson. So in that sense, it was a failure, and this is part of the reason which depressed him. Because he was pressing on with this, and he did want to. I think at the beginning he did want to cover the lot, but even he, with his tremendous powers, because he'd done all these, as I said, he'd written 500,000 words earlier on. He could write, he could get it out, could really get stuff out. but even him with his tremendous powers couldn't do this great job, especially the sort of job he wanted to do. He didn't just want to do an ordinary dictionary. He wanted to do, these very long and quite comprehensive histories of the words and explanations of the words.
And he also wanted to quote examples.
Quoted plenty of examples from Shakespeare and so on, and he gutted any number of books that he to get these people, these copyists, to copy it out, amanuenses they call them, don't they? And copy it out, and so he got them, and he, of course, halfway through, the printers were complaining that he was going over the 3 years, that he said he would do it in. And they were complaining that it was coming late and it was too long and so on. And Chesterfield had forgotten him. I mean, there is one thing, of course, Chesterfield gave him this £10. He wrote 1 or 2 articles advertising the work. And Johnson went to see Chesterfield and he kept him waiting for more than an hour outside. That was, I think that would have been all right. But what happened is that Chesterfield didn't come out into the chamber room himself, but Collie Chibber did, and he was a poet who Johnson knew and didn't particularly like, and I think Johnson was insulted by the fact that he spent time with an inferior chap instead of talking to Johnson, and he took a grudge against Chesterfield. Now Boswell put this to him, and he says, no, that isn't the reason. He generally did neglect me anyway. It wasn't just that. He neglected me anyway. But Johnson didn't go back to see him after that. And I think if Johnson had gone back to see him, because Chesterfield was just forgetful. That was Chesterfield's real point. But he was very forgetful, because when these printers were making trouble for Johnson, Chesterfield just didn't know anything about it. He just didn't pay attention to it. I think Johnson was expecting some sort of help. Whenever he was in difficulty, he was expecting Chesterfield to at least come and nurse him, give him a pat on the back or something. This is what he expected from him. And he got nothing. He just got ignored. Now, of course, his wife died halfway through this. Tetty died, 1752, and Chesterfield didn't say anything to him then either. And he gave up the dictionary altogether, and he was depressed and in trouble. But eventually, he picked himself up and went back to it and started having another go at it and got it out. And he got it out, of course, as I say, much reduced from what he didn't. He only dealt with about less than a fifth of the language. He wanted to deal with a lot of it, so it was a failure in many respects. But nevertheless, he got it out. And for once it was out, Chesterfield noticed it, of course, and started writing more articles saying it was a good dictionary and so on. And he bought a copy of it and so on. And it was costing £4.10 for each volume. That means there's 10 shillings, and that means £9 for 2 volumes. But Chesterfield thought that out, and so. But then Johnson was insulted. He said, "You've neglected me all this time," and he wrote that famous letter, which you might have heard, saying I'd never had a patron before, so I didn't know that I'd been neglected like this, and so on. And he just ignored the £10 and so on. Well, £10 are not to be snuffed at in those days. Nevertheless, he just ignored that. That was tantamount to nothing. And he wrote this famous letter, ticking Chesterfield off, which Chesterfield said was written in perfect English, and he put it on his desk for everyone to see. Chesterfield was, and of course this wasn't published until after Johnson was died. The letter, now it's because it's published in here in the Life of Johnson, so Chesterfield didn't mind so much. But then, of course, he got revenge on Chesterfield again when Chesterfield brought out some advice to his son, and of course the celebrated review of this by Johnson said it has the morals of a morals of a dancing master, I think. I've forgotten that.
It might be the style of a dancing master, the morals of a whore, was it?
Yeah, I think so. Something like that. Morals of a. I've forgotten the. I'm sorry about that. The morals of a. Oh, that's right. It had the morals of a prostitute and the etiquette of a dancing master. I think that's what he said. And but of course, so that was the dictionary. He came out, and of course, then he was well known throughout the land, and but of course, he was still poor. He'd spent most of the money on the dictionary on hiring these people to copy things up, and he was put into a debtor's prison because he owed someone about £6, which was a fair amount in that time. And it was Richardson who got him out. And he was becoming national. This chap, who was now well known, was getting arrested every now and again for debt. And so what happened is that I think Bute, who was then, George III had just come to the throne, the first English-speaking king in ages, and Bute said, well, we can't have this man who's just written this magnificent dictionary being arrested for debt every 5 minutes. We'll have to give him a pension. And so they gave him, George III, through Bute, gave him a pension of £300 a year, which rescued him from all this and put him on a firm base. And then afterwards he met the Frowes, who I mentioned earlier on, the MP, and he was more or less made one of the family, and he meant he brushed himself up a bit and brushed his hygiene up and his dress up a bit and was more respectable and was stopping half the time in the Frowes. Of course, after his wife died, he did, in his own home, he took quite a few people in. He took, one was a young boy who was a Negro slave, who was, Johnson was always against slavery, he hated slavery, and he took this chap in on the advice of a club member who told him about him, tried to urge him to take him on. So this chap's name was Francis Barber. He was only about 10 years of age. He wasn't very old. And he brought him up and he sent him to school and so on and tried to look after him as much as he could. And eventually he left his fortune to this chap, Francis Barber. But he also took in a doctor who was down and out doctor who administered to the poor for next to no money. He took him in. He also took in the lady who used to look after Tetty before she died. And he also took in a blind poet called Mrs. Williams. And all these lived in the house and they kept Johnson company. But basically he was more after the Frales than at home anyway. So, and he settled in, and Mrs. Frale, of course, was delighted to know Johnson. Of course, I told you about this club earlier on that had started with all these wonderful people. They're all men, of course. Mrs. Frale set up a salon that invited these men and their wives and other people and some blue stockings, celebrated blue stockings, who came to the salon. So that brought in, and Fanny Burney, who was the daughter of Charles Burney, who was an expert at art, who came along to the salon, and of course the father was a member of the club. So no, he was an expert in music, beg pardon, not art. Reynolds was art. Charles Burney was music, an expert at music. So, sorry for that mistake. Too many mistakes here, isn't there? But sorry for all these mistakes. But anyway, I was a member of music. So then the club was going on, and Johnson was going on, and he then came to more mistakes here. I forgot my. Forgot where. So Mrs. Then he met Boswell. That was a meeting with Boswell. This was after he settled in at the Frales. He met Boswell, and Boswell, of course, was invited along to the Frales now and again. Although Mrs. Frale didn't like him very much, and they never did get on, those two. And they're both competitors, I suppose, with Johnson's affections, I suppose. They both wrote biographies of Johnson after he died. So Boswell, he mentioned he met Boswell, and Boswell got him to argue with a lot of people who he had never met. He got him to meet Wilkes, who he'd hated all his life. Johnson had hated Wilkes, and there is a tale that goes on with Wilkes. Johnson is celebrated for saying patriotism is the last
last refuge of a scoundrel.
Last refuge of a scoundrel. Now, many people misinterpret this. They think that it's Johnson being anti-patriotic, but of course it isn't. Wilkes was the sort of person who was a bit like recently Tony Benn, or even perhaps the current leader of the Labour Party was until recently before he became the leader. he was like a patriot in the sense that he made a lot of trouble in Parliament and elsewhere. And whenever someone accused him of stirring up trouble, he says, well, I'm doing it for the sake of my country, it's patriotism. And that's what Johnson meant when he says patriotism is the last refuge of a scoundrel. He meant you're really a scoundrel, you're really bad for the country, and you use patriotism as an excuse. And so that's what he meant. But so he disliked Wilkes immensely. Wilkes brought out a magazine called The North Briton, which was running down the king and the king's men, and running down Parliament and running down the country generally. And Johnson didn't like it, and he didn't like Wilkes. But then Boswell engineered a meeting between the two men. Once they met, they got on quite well. They got on very well indeed. There's many things that Boswell did that, with Johnston. Of course, it's Boswell is the reason why we call him Dr. Johnson. Like most men, he never called himself Dr. Johnson. Most people who have a PhD in Britain don't put letters after their name or before their name. It's a custom in England not to do that. You know, so if you meet a PhD, they'll very rarely tell you they're a PhD. The odd person does. You know, it's usually a person who's exceptionally proud of it. You know, perhaps he's the first college-educated person in his family or something.
I know someone who constantly calls herself Pappy's MBE. Besides everything on Facebook and all the time.
Yeah, there is the odd bod. And some people do it twice. They write a book and they say, Dr. Ryan Giggs, as it were, PhD. So you've got your doctor and your PhD. And, you know, you're repeating yourself. You should either have PhD, like it's either Mr. or Esquire. You shouldn't say Mr. Ryan Giggs Esquire. You know, so, but anyway, most people though in Britain don't do it. In England certainly don't do that. But and Dr. Johnson didn't do it, but Boswell did. He forever called him Dr. Johnson.
Did he actually get the title of doctor through his studies?
No, through his dictionary. First of all, he wouldn't release the dictionary unless he got an MA, which was odd enough in the dictionary called IM on the front of the dictionary. He wouldn't release the dictionary because he thought he had to have some. Dr. Johnson didn't normally want letters after his name, but for the dictionary he thought it was vital. He thought it was absolutely vital for a book of that sort, that you should have some letter. And then Dublin first of all gave him a D.Litt, and then Oxford eventually gave him a D.Litt, so he's got two doctorships. So he became known as Dr. Johnson. He has two. He could be called Dr. Johnson. I remember with those, but when you had trouble in Bosnia and you had people appearing on television, of course they got any number of PhDs over there. And they used to come on these current affair programs and go, no, I'm not Dr. Bloggerswak or something. I'm Dr. Bloggerswak.
Well, that's a German practice. If you have more than one, they call you Doctor. Not sure about all the others, but certainly.
And they do in Yugoslavia, yeah. Well, it is on British media, yeah. So Dr. Johnson could have called himself Doctor, because he's from Dublin and from Oxford.
Were these honorary titles though? Because he didn't study.
No, they afford the dictionary.
What? Sorry.
They afford the dictionary.
I know, but he didn't study at these institutions, so they were.
He was he studied at Oxford.
Honorary titles.
He did study at Oxford.
Yeah, but not Dublin, though.
Not Dublin, no.
Yes, but they could regard that work as his...
As his thesis.
As his major work.
Yeah, well, they did. I mean, very often, Priestley, for example, didn't get his Dr. Priestley, Dr. Joseph Priestley. He didn't get his... he never studied at Edinburgh, where he got his St Andrews, where he got his doctorship from. And a lot of people didn't think that, a PhD, of course, you don't have to be at the institution to get your PhD from there. I mean, although many colleges do stipulate that you're there for a year or something.
But it wasn't what I'm trying to get at. It's not the modern equivalent of an honorary title which is awarded to, I don't know, a celebrity or, because you become famous on television, you get an honorary degree from a university.
Well, there is some grey matter over there, because a lot of these are honorary. Although usually an honorary one is for someone who's done something like Dr. Johnson's dictionary, but then they do kind of like extend this for someone perhaps even like Bruce Forsyth. No, I'm not saying he got one. I'm saying they could stretch it that far. So it's the same sort of it's the same sort of, it's a dry area, as it were. So, so then
He has to die soon, so we can
yes,
ask
that's
him,
right, so
so we can ask some questions.
yes, okay.
You were talking about the...
So he then went on to, what happened is that the beginning of the end was Mr. Frail died. And then he knew there'd be differences in the Frail household, and he wouldn't be a member of the family, even though he got on very well with the wife. Very well indeed, in fact. He still wouldn't he wouldn't be quite like it was before. But then the doctor who was living with him died. All these people were dying left, right, centre, and Johnson himself was getting a bit frail. And it then became rumoured that he'd marry Mrs. Frail, but of course she was only 40 and he was 70, coming up 75 thereabouts. And by the way, I should have said that his father and himself died at the same age as 75. I meant to say that earlier on. Something he had in common with his father. They both died at the age of 75. And he was 75, and she certainly liked him and so on, but she certainly wasn't going to marry him. But she fancied the music teacher of their children, Mr. Pizzoni, and she married him. Now he thought, Johnson didn't, I don't think Johnson expected to marry her, but he thought that she'd let herself down, as indeed her daughters did, by marrying this chap. He was a Catholic, and Catholicism was still frowned on then in 18th century England. He thought he'd let herself down, and he let this be known. And of course she said, and she wrote him a letter saying, until you think better of my fiancé, as he then was, we better not speak to each other again. And so they fell out over this. And she eventually married this chap. And Johnson didn't see her again. And Johnson was failing health. He had an attack. He had a stroke, and he couldn't speak for 3 or 4 days. But then he recovered his language, his ability to speak, and eventually, things were just getting worse and worse. And eventually, it looked as if he was going to die. And his friends, Fanny Burney, visited him often. His earlier father, Charles Burney, was dead by then. He one of the people who died off. Fanny Burney visited him regularly and looked after him a bit. And he was getting more and more frail. And so his close friends came from Oxford to see him, and visited now and again. But then he died in 1784. Then afterwards, of course, there was the biographies. The first one was by Mrs. Pizzini, as she then was, former Mrs. Frail. There was a biography by Sir John Hawkins, which is a very good one. There were 3 or 4 biographies. Some of them, John Hawkins was bigger than the 3 or 4 rivals. He'd gone with Boswell to Scotland, and he wrote a book on this called A Tour of the Northern Isles. And Boswell himself had written a volume on this, which was really came out after Johnson was dead, the year after Johnson was dead, 1785, and it was sort of a preface, a forerunner of the life of Johnson, because it mainly talked about Johnson and him in the Scottish Highlands, and how they got on in the Scottish Highlands, and that was a good sale. All these sold like hotcakes. And then Johnson, he spent 6 years on, Boswell spent 6 years on this book, and brought out the 2 volumes. And the first volume came out 1790, and the second volume 1791, and that pipped all the rest by a mile. But I think Mrs. Frail brought out 3 volumes of memoirs, memorabilia. I was going to say, is it memorabilia?
Memorabilia is collections of
sayings.
Well, things associated with them more.
Yeah, yeah. That memorabilia, I suppose, is the right word. Sorry for all these mistakes. But yeah, so memorabilia, I suppose. 3 volumes of memorabilia, I suppose that'd be right. That'd be right.
Memorial?
It's collections of objects which...
is it? Oh,
Mm.
oh,
Yeah, I
that's
think.
not right then.
Just her memories.
Memories, yeah.
Recollections of?
Recollections of, yeah. Free books. She brought out free
Did
books.
all this take place in that one house opposite
No.
Oxford Street?
No, Johnson must have lived in about 50 places in London.
So it wasn't
And
just that one.
that one house in